For GCCs, digital trust is no longer just about compliance. It is about business continuity, brand credibility, and global mandate ownership. With India's DPDPA now in force and GCCs managing data across multiple jurisdictions, the question is no longer whether to comply, but how to embed privacy, resilience, and cyber governance into operating DNA of global centers. Thanks for tuning into ET Studios video in association with KPMG on digital trust and resilience imperatives for success. I'm joined by Rachit Chhokera, partner KPMG India, Nanda Lakkaraju, Managing Director, Career Technologies India, and Chakravarthy Aravapalli, VP IT&D, ERP and Center Head, Hyderabad Hub, Reckitt. Thank you everyone for joining us today. So Nanda, if I may come to you first. So, what does digital trust actually mean in a GCC context where data flows across continents daily?
Thank you, Saurabh, for the opportunity. And in GCCs, frankly, we deal with different geographies of the world. It could be the US, it could be Europe, it could be Asia, etc. And we're also dealing with products that could be there for many generations, in an industrial setting. So when we trust the data, we're really talking about the integrity of the data, the access to the data, what we are storing, and the use of that particular data. So I think all of these have their contributions into the digital trust area.
Yeah, I would just build on what Nanda said. It's more than the IT checklist. One is the license to operate, which is important. But the other thing is it's become a business imperative to have these two things. It is more about surviving and thriving during disruption. These are two essential things, not for just architectural design, but for business execution. And hence, it's very important for us to ensure the data privacy, data accessibility, and it becomes important for systems to be designed in a way that we are able to cater to all the needs of all the markets. So it's very important.
Yeah, right. Rachit?
Yeah. I think digital trust revolves around, the three core principles, which is talking about security, accountability, and ethical use. So, irrespective of, the way you transfer the data out or you keep the data within GCCs, I think it's important for the GCCs to ensure that the overall data protection is taken care of, one. And second is in terms of ensuring the cross-jurisdictional aspect which comes in, the multiple regulations that we see, affecting not just the parent, but the GCC as well are, taken care of. And also, I think it's important to ensure that the trust is instilled not just in the employees which are here in GCC, but also the regulators sitting across the globe, and also instilling some bit of trust back to the parent organization, the headquarters as well, so that the core tech and the engineering and the COEs which have been set up here in India for GCCs continue to operate in a seamless manner.
Great. You touched upon an important point, which is multi-geography. So, GCCs have to operate under GDPR, CCPA, and, DPDPA now in India as well. So, probably staying with you, Rachit, what are the real friction points in navigating multi-jurisdictional, privacy compliances?
We have seen a few friction points, Saurabh, and while you have a global policy which is guiding you, there's a global policy which is coming in from the headquarters. GCC may have to follow that and align themselves to the global policy. The major friction point comes in, where there are local laws, local regulations which they need to comply to. So one is aligning themselves to the best practices which have been set in at the headquarters, ensuring that the local laws and the local regulations are taken care of. So I think that's one point of friction that we have seen. Second is the overall ecosystem of data discovery and data lineage. So there are data aspects, data elements which are sitting at applications, in systems which are there hosted at the parent, and there are instances of those running at the GCC as well. So how do you ensure that the data which you have here in GCC comprehensively, covers the entire journey of the data, right from the time the data hits your system till the time you process it or pass it on to a third party for processing. So how do you create that seamless journey and the lineage for the data across continents, across geographies? So that again is is a point of friction that needs to be taken care of. And then the last bit is on the overall aspect of the third party processor ecosystem that you have. We have seen globally, there are processors, third parties, which cut across continents, especially the cloud providers. How do you manage these cloud service providers, third parties, who are cutting across jurisdictions, cutting across regulations, to ensure that the compliance is taken care of for the GCC operating here in India?
Right. Jeffrey, how are you dealing with this issue?
I think the challenge is multifold. Hence, it is very important to start with the architectural thinking. So it should be embedded into the design principles of architecture. Compliance is no longer a checklist, it's a mandatory thing. So the thinking is all about zero trust architecture, which means like say, always check, always verify, never trust. So which brings us to things involving about continuous monitoring, which used to be not the case in the past. Like say today we monitor the application landscape every 5 seconds. We have tools that can really look and listen to the noise and constantly look at how things are being exchanged, the information is being accessed. So there's a lot more monitoring that is being put into place. And the design of the systems, the architectural systems are much more robust. The thinking is even from the design phase. And the last one I would call is, it's all about like say, to have a business continuity plan when things happen. So it is always an afterthought in the past. There is never business continuity plans that were created. Today, it is all about like say, you need to have a BCP in place before even the design starts. So these are the ways to navigate how to manage the trust that we need to build into the systems that we are developing, at the same time for the trust of the data that we have within the organization.
You talked about zero trust and all this, putting in place those architecture. I've heard leaders saying that these at times are hindrance to innovation because there's a lot of delay, or probably, the system becomes more longer. So do you agree with that?
Yes or no, slightly. I would say it depends upon the agility the teams can demonstrate and the readiness and the preparation that people can do during ideation and all. See, the cost of not doing it is much more than the delay that you might have. If the cycles used to take 6 months versus now 8 months, it's not a big thing to lose. But if things happen and something goes wrong, the cost of it is more difficult to manage. And with the advent of tools, like say, I would not undermine the technology, like with the challenge, with the emerging AI opportunities. There are ways to manage the life cycle of the development in a better way. You can still meet the damn timelines, provided, like say, you take the advantage of some of the technology that is around. And we should come out of that mindset of like say, that the thinking is just like say, hey, there's a reason to call out like say why my development cycle is now much longer than, but it's not a non-negotiable, it's a non-negotiable thing. Like you have to do it, you have to embed it. So that's a starting point. But you still have to deliver it in 6 months, it's 6 months. So I think this shift of mindset a little bit than an afterthought will make it happen.
I kind of like what, sorry, just jumping in, but I was tempted, when I heard Chakri talk about, sometimes you have to kind of slow down to go faster later. But friction sometimes is not necessarily a bad thing. Right? I mean, when let's say if you're walking on an ice-covered surface, friction is required when you're walking there. And I think it kind of forces you to think, Chakri talked about architecture and secure by design and some of these principles. So I think it's important to embed these right up front. It might take a little bit of effort at front, but it's much better to spend the time and money up front as opposed to doing it later. And I think that's really the essence of what you're saying.
Yes.
So,
Okay. Any
No, I think, and that's what even, when we talk about privacy as well, we talk about privacy by design, right? We're looking at privacy, embedding privacy principles right at the time, we start doing a development of a product, new process, new application, so it's always shift left in privacy as well, it cannot be an afterthought, once you're
Of course,
completed
can't
with
be an
the
afterthought at this age and time, especially. So, Nanda, I'll come to you, and in an industrial technology environment like Carrier, where IoT connected systems are critical, how do regulations, intersect with operational resilience?
See, I think first of all, regulations in general, I think are going to force us to think better about, our entire architecture, about our governance, about our processes, etc. So I think there's a lot more thought that actually goes into developing the product. And also in an environment like ours, our products could be in the field for 15, 20, 30 years. So it's not just what we have today, but what's also going to happen to the life cycle of the product over the number of years. And please also understand that, you've got different people who interact with our products. You've got manufacturing people who interact with the products. Once it gets into the field, you've got service technicians and engineers who interface with the product. You could have users who interface with the product. So depending on which role, who's playing, what kind of role do they have, what kind of access do they have, how do you make sure that in this increasingly connected world, that you trust really what's coming to you? I'll give you a small example. Right? Let's say part of our business is in transport refrigeration. So if you've got a vaccine, for example, that is being transported from one part of the world to another part of the world, or if you've got food that goes into your stomach, how do you make sure, you've got data that kind of come in, and there's a lot of telemetry data, there's data about temperature. How do you make sure that what you're eating is safe, or those vaccines are preserved right? So I think there's a lot of data that goes in. And I think GCCs especially deal with different geographies and different product life cycles, different types of products. So in an industrial environment, I think it is more complex, but ultimately I think regulations help us to think more comprehensively about what we can do upfront in our design to make our products secure by design and also secure in the aftermarket process.
Is it any different in your industry?
No, it is exactly the same. But to build on what Nanda said, say it is more about how do you embed things like identity access management. Who gets to access what is very important. Who has the access to the information that is required, and how can we customize it to the user experience? And hence, it is now getting very prominent that we all need to have this identity access management across every system, across every application that is existing in the organization. We have 3,500 applications in the company. Imagine, say, how many of these systems truly have identity access management really applied. Hardly, maybe the enterprise-grade applications, but there could be many applications who still someone can access getting closer to the application or the shop floor equipment and still get access to some of the sensitive information of that particular equipment. So I think that is the key. I think it all goes to the design. It should all be embedded at the thought of design. All these things needs to be thought through. And we do the same thing, nothing different.
Okay. Rachit, I'll come to you. So you heard that, we need to have design where it's, the protection is embedded. And now we have DPDPA. So from a regulatory advisory perspective, what are the most common blind spots you see in GCCs, especially, considering now that we have DPDPA in place?
I think globally, most of the organizations, when GDPR came in and CCPA came in, they aligned themselves to those regulations. And typically, GCCs operating in India, were a processor in the entire, that regulatory landscape. Now they have to pivot, So now they are no longer a processor. As per DPDPA, they'll be the data fiduciary or the data controller. So that's the pivot that the GCCs will have to do here. And that's what they've been doing since the time the Act came in. Also, in terms of having consent as the a good mechanism for processing the data. Globally, if you see, there are regulations which specify legitimate interest as one of the lawful basis for processing of personal data. Whereas in DPDPA, we don't have the legitimate interest clearly called out. So how do you ensure that consent is taken properly, not just from the customers, but from your employees, vendors, contractors as well? And herein we have seen, I think what GCCs need to do, and they've been doing, is to create the overall data inventory in terms of not just figuring out what the data elements are, but to whom these data elements belong to, whether it's an employee data, whether it's a third-party data or contractor data. So that's one area that GCCs have been focusing on. And the other bit is on the overall bit on the data discovery part. I think I spoke about it earlier as well. Wherein how do you ensure that the discovery happens seamlessly within your environment to ensure that the data lineage is created. And also, I think the GCCs largely we have seen lately, they've been focusing a lot on the third-party ecosystem. So how do we define our third-party ecosystem to ensure that we're able to figure out which elements, personal data elements, are getting transferred to the third party and what level of processing are they doing. Like the example which Nanda, which you gave, how do we get the confidence from our third parties so that we can pass on the confidence back to our customers of what processing we are doing within our ecosystem and what personal data elements we are consuming from the customer and then processing it. So what's that entire ecosystem looks like and what's the feedback we're giving back to our customers.
Right. No, this third party is one of the very interesting things, and very what do I say, a pain for organizations also, because you can't live without them, and you need to ensure that the zero trust environment. I think that necessitates the zero trust environment as well. So has things changed post DPDPA for you, Chakri, or it's the same right now? And how do you deal with this third party issue when it especially comes to compliance?
I think it has become now important, like say, even the contractual agreements start with the conversation of data privacy. In the past, it was all about the space, the basic things of checkboxes, but now the checklist has become much more robust, right? We're starting the conversation about what are your systems, what's the data privacy protection that you have and all that. But the challenge with DPDA and all these kind of new policies across countries is actually much complex for enterprise applications. The scalability of the architecture, the flexibility in the design is now really challenging the organizations to think through their architecture very differently. Imagine ERPs, which are much heavy global applications. If now one country brings in this kind of a new policy, it's not easy for organizations to now pivot to that overnight. It comes with huge investment. It actually tests your flexibility in the design architecture. So now we need to be more flexible by design. Compliance by design is good, but the design flexibility is taking much more precedence at the same time. And I can tell, like, say, it's not easy to create a new instance of ERP. China wants some data privacy. India wants the data privacy. We want to keep the data within the country. We host the systems globally in a cloud environment somewhere, and that's a global environment. And now all of a sudden you want to create a local environment. It's trillions of data that we are talking, and it's a huge cost and millions of investment. And now it's not just creating one instance. And how do you connect this instance to the other applications, and how do you still access the data that you need to access? So it's all boils down to the flexibility of architecture is what I would say.
Okay. Nanda, any thoughts?
No, I think it is an evolving area, and I think we will continue to learn and adapt. And I think part of what you talked about is data flows across boundaries, across geographies. Sometimes products flow across boundaries, so you could have a container that could be going on a truck, it could be going on a rail, it could be going on a sea, and with it comes the data and information that you have. And I think the important element is to make sure that our end goal is pretty clear, but how we do it, in which geography and the steps that we need to take, I think we need to become a lot more resilient towards that area. And so I think it's we will learn as we go along.
Rachit, if I may come to you, you've seen many organizations do that. How fast is this adoption or learning? Because now a new compliance has come, and you talked about that. GCCs are learning, but how fast is that? Is it enough?
It is not enough. Some places we have seen GCCs relying on their global compliance of GDPR, CCPA, and wanting to leverage that to ensure they're complying to DPDPA. But that is not enough.
Yeah, because
right?
both are different. I mean, there are very
Exactly.
different aspects to all of these. Yeah.
And I think the position also changes, right? The way the GCCs would operate under DPDPA in India, wherein they are the data fiduciary, versus how they have been operating till now under GDPR and CCPA as a data processor, that also changes. And it's not just a change of process, it's a change of mindset as well. How do we ensure that we are changing, the entire process of, till now, the employee data was considered as just the employee data. Now we'll have to manage the employee data, not just the employee data, maybe the data of their families as well, because, we have medical benefits which are given to the employees as well. So it goes beyond, just the employee. Similarly, when we talk about the overall mechanism for, doing the consent part of it, there are policies which have been defined in GCCs, that'll again need to be re-engineered to ensure that the policy takes care of all the aspects of DPDPA. So while GCCs are relying on GDPR and CCPA, saying that we have aligned ourselves to GDPR and CCPA, but still there's a long path that they need to cover to be able to completely be aligned to DPDPA and its requirements.
Is that true, Chakri, that we are relying on GDPR and CCPA experience to comply with DPDP as of now?
I'll tell you a simple thing. Like say, it becomes very interesting. Like say, the level of challenge that we have today in our systems is, can we really ensure, like say, people who leave the organizations have no longer have access to the system? And how resilient are we with people leaving organization? Simple thing, right? Like say, I can bet, like say, enterprise organizations can really be challenged. How many people in the organization know that when the contractor gets onboarded, when the contractor gets leaving, do we make sure that the people don't have the access to the systems on the day of their tenure or the day they're leaving? It's not practical. And we have instances where people realize, line managers realize that third-party people have access even after they're leaving. And they only realize that we have to just go and update in the system that the last date was something else. And now you're doing backdating, and which means, like say, you're not really, this is still not got into the mindset of people that it is everybody's responsibility to protect the data. And hence, it needs to be a mindset shift. As I totally agree with you. It is not about knowing the policy. It is not about what to share, how you lean on to what. But it's more about, like say, that sensitivity to the understanding of data is still very nascent. People are still very tech-oriented. Like, I can develop a solution, I can do this, I can do that. But the understanding of data exchange is not very clear.
And maybe also that, as you said, that there is an architecture in place and suddenly you need to switch to another sort of architecture. That's also a sort of a difficult proposition.
It is a very difficult proposition. It's not easy. All these things is very good to talk the policy. It is good to tell what is the mandate. Adoption becomes very difficult. Adoption is the biggest challenge. And hence it is years of journey. And I think everybody has started recognizing it over the last few years, and they're getting better. That's all.
Okay. Any ways in which these long processes can be shortened?
I think just to add to Chakri's point, I think one is, I think everybody thinks of this DPDP and data privacy as the responsibility of either the center head or the IT function or the security function. I think we need to understand it is everybody's responsibility. I think that is one thing which I think everybody needs to be aware of. The sensitization has started, but still a long way to go. So I think one is to ensure that everybody is in the game together. It can't just be done by a technology function or a security function or a risk function. So it has to be a cumulative effort of all the key stakeholders. And second is, like the way Chakri mentioned, a mindset shift. So how do we ensure that we just don't follow the process for the sake of compliance? We follow the process in spirit to be able to ensure we are able to comply to the regulations. So I think if you're able to do this, I think it'll take some time, but yeah, I think we're slowly getting there.
Now I get to my favorite part, which is, Nanda, I'll come to you with this. So now we heard that, it's a process, everyone needs to learn, long process. Are we exchanging notes, resilience playbooks with each other in terms of, understanding what's happening and what can be done faster?
I think we're getting better, but are we there where we want to be? Absolutely not. I think we can collaborate across our GCCs a whole lot more, and I really see the collaboration across GCCs beginning to grow, in different industries. But in this particular area, I think a lot of it is obviously sensitive information and sensitive architecture. So, but I think what both Rachit and Chakri mentioned, right? It is a mindset shift. So I couldn't agree more with that particular. I think it needs to broaden the conversation. It is not the ownership of one particular person or one particular department. And I think that, we do share information about, let's say, what's happening on perceived threats, etc. We kind of get that, and there is disclosure publicly, on all those areas. But in terms of sharing playbooks, in terms of how can we get better at identifying some of these vulnerabilities ahead of time, sharing a playbook on how we are really becoming more resilient, how can we really get, I don't think we are doing that as structured manner as as we probably could. So I think there's a great opportunity to collaborate amongst the GCCs. I've been here for the last few years, in the Hyderabad ecosystem, and I see a lot more, I'm not talking in this particular topic, but in general, I think a lot of the centers are beginning to exchange best practices with each other on a variety of topics. And I think this is also, while this is a sensitive area, I think there's an opportunity to really exchange notes so that collectively, I think our response can be a lot stronger, going forward.
So again, because data is involved here, Chakri, is it difficult to collaborate in this area? Because again, the trust, it's about data, right?
You're right, but we don't need to really necessarily exchange the data. It is the ideation. It is, I'll tell you a few examples of programs that we do. Resilience has become an important word. Look at our manufacturing industries or the factories that we have. Dated 50 years, 100 years old infrastructure, networking. You go and do a cyber assessment, you'll come back saying everything red. We are talking about the supply chain, value chain, all the way up to consumer, but just go into the factory and just do an internal audit to say, where does this factory stand in terms of cyber resilience? And I'm pretty sure most of the factories come out right. So there is a resilience that needs to be built in the factory's shop floor. There is a resilience that is required in the labs that we use to test our products. There's a resilience that is required in the supply chain. So we can exchange these kind of program knowledge. Hey, what is that we are doing in digital manufacturing backbone? How are we refreshing your infrastructure, your cyber network? What does it mean to your data privacy? How does it protect your data better? How does it give you more cyber resilience? I think that's how you can exchange knowledge rather than worrying too much about.
No, I couldn't agree more, Chakri. It's not so much the data as such, but I think a lot of industries will be facing similar kinds of challenges, right? You could have 10, 15-year-old product, which could be accessed in a multiple of ways. It could be physical, it could be network-based, etc. And how are you dealing with those? I think can be a good opportunity for best practice sharing, and how are you dealing with these areas. So I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity.
So Rachit, I was telling you that, still there is some smoke screen around DPDPA right now. So what, Chakri and Nanda is talking about, we can exchange ideas, but not more. Is that even, will DPDPA in any way will restrict that as well somewhere? Because there are a lot of restrictions around exchanging data or anything, information across, organizations.
It won't. In terms of data, yes, it will. But in terms of ideas, best practices, because I think we're looking at a common denominator here across GCCs, right? In terms of regulatory landscape, because we have similar regulatory landscape to take care of. That will still remain same across GCCs, irrespective of the sector they operate in, irrespective of the parent in which geography they operate in. So I think that common denominator could be the the common thread tying all the GCCs together. And also like the way Nanda mentioned, information sharing. We have seen horizontal information sharing across continents, but within the organization, and vertical information sharing within the entities of that GCC within the country. But we haven't seen a more collective approach towards information sharing across GCCs which operate here in India. And therein lies the opportunity. And DPDP has given a good platform for all of us, in fact, to be able to do that. I think.
And in a very structured way, probably.
In a structured way. Yeah. We've seen collaborations happening. We've seen roundtables happening wherein GCC center heads are coming together, discussing how do we deal with the new compliance on that we have in front of us. So I think that has actually helped the organizations to kind of come together, sit together, discuss the best practices on how to navigate not just the compliance, which is an immediate ask, but overall, improving their posture across, multiple business functions within GCC.
Chakri, I'll come to you with, keeping the same thread, that what is that uncomfortable truth about digital trust that, we are not discussing, and we must, and especially with this changing environment of compliances?
It's a mindset. It's a very uncomfortable thing. People feel they are getting hired for their technical abilities, business knowledge, subject matter expertise, and none of this is taught in their evolution in the 20 years of their career. I don't think, unless you're working in a risk and a compliance kind of an area of work, otherwise, it's hard for any of these so-called tech professionals or business architects or business professionals to really understand the gravity of this. They always see it as a distraction, an afterthought, most probably, always finding it as a one thing that can slow down, but they're not feeling it like, say, it is a mandate. So that is the biggest challenge. People don't understand the gravity, people don't have clue to what is it truly, what it can lead to. And we do a lot of trainings. We make mandatory trainings for annual compliance. And people just go do that as a part of checklist. But do they apply this on day-to-day basis when they really build solutions and have the conversations? When they walk out to a 3PL, when they walk out to a distributor, does compliance really ring onto their head first, or the problem, the business, the P&L, the solution, the application, which rings bell first? I think the later, not the first. So compliance is not still ringing in the head as a top one.
And why is it so? I mean, compliance being, we all talked about that compliance now is, it's compliance first. Then why is it not still happening? Nanda, if I may come to you.
No, I wouldn't say compliance is not happening. I think what I understood really, Chakri, to say is the most uncomfortable part of it, I think, is the mindset shift that you're talking about, saying that, look, it's not just me doing my job in this particular domain. I need to think broader. I need to think upstream. I need to think about what I'm doing, and I also need to think about what's going to happen downstream for every one of my action. And it doesn't matter which particular function you're doing in that particular company, right? So I think we are all sort of interconnected when it comes to a product or service. Different departments, different functions get together to develop this. And so I think it kind of forces you to think more holistically about this. And I think that's really what I kind of picked up from you. Saying that don't sit down and say that this compliance checklist is something that, let's say, our product cybersecurity officer needs to do, or a particular engineering lead has to do. It's everybody really kind of playing a role in that one. And I think this particularly gets magnified in capital goods because you could have long product life cycles in the field. It's not just about a one-time sale, etc., but what do you do with this product for 15, 20 years? And I think that's really where the challenge is. It's uncomfortable only because I think it's a little bit new from what I understand. It's not that people don't want to do it, right? And I think the more we practice it, that muscle in us, I think, is going to get stronger as we go along.
Do you agree, Rachit, that mindset is the main culprit here, or there's more to it?
Absolutely, mindset definitely. And I think the way Chakri mentioned, I think people are so used to doing their BAU stuff, delivering, their business, which is, the core of their entire, portfolio of, the work that they do. But it is slowly shifting, the way Nanda mentioned. I think compliance also is something which everybody's taking cognizance of now, saying that we just can't keep on doing our business without taking cognizance of the compliance as well. In fact, what we have seen some organizations do is have compliance champions created within the functions, and it's on a rotation basis. So at maybe in a year, you'll have maybe an engineering lead taking up the responsibility of compliance for that function. Next year, somebody else will be taking on the responsibility of that compliance, for that specific function. I think by that, you're in a way subtly, ensuring that they are also embedded in the overall compliance ecosystem of the organization. And it's not just left to the risk and compliance function of an organization.
I would like to add on to that. Exactly the word I wanted to tell. It is still thought as a specialist job. Compliance is a specialist job. It's true, but that's for policy making, for telling you what is the process to follow, but not for day-to-day execution. And that exactly goes down to, like, say, if everybody can be cross-skill, then you slowly start feeling it is part of you. It's that you own it, the way you said it. So it is still a specialist job. Let's accept that. And it has to be come down from a specialist job to a norm and mandate for everyone.
I think, Chakri, again, you reminded me of a very powerful manufacturing saying that we had. You can inspect bad quality out, but you cannot inspect good quality in. I think what changed in manufacturing fundamentally is everybody has a role to make sure that the best quality was our output, and everybody had a role to play in it. I think to what you're saying, it can't be a specialist job. It has to be a more generalist approach, onto this one, where we are all sort of keeping an eye out for each other.
So Rachit, I'll come to you. So, I mean, obviously it's a specialist job, but then it has to be followed by everyone. But according to you, what's that collective approach, if I may say, to digital resilience and actually look like in practice, if you can make us understand?
Yeah, I think something what we discussed, in terms of ensuring one resilience, in terms of how are we ensuring that we are able to, run our operations seamlessly and not just look at us as GCC in silo, right? When we are an important entity in the overall, organizational ecosystem, right, globally as well. So, not just look at ourselves in silo and say that we need to operate to in case there's anything which is affecting us, it'll have an impact at the parent or globally as well at an organizational level. So, how do we integrate that with the global parent? And I think the way we discussed, in terms of ensuring that all the stakeholders are a part of that ecosystem. And when I say stakeholders, it's not just the stakeholders within the organization, within the GCC. You're talking about regulators. I think government is also trying to, keep up, pace with their regulations because of the evolution of technology, right? So how are we ensuring that we are equally in sync with that, government mandate of the regulations which are coming in? Then we have the entire ecosystem of our vendors, contractors, third parties. They have their different requirements as well. Chakri mentioned, the entire contractual clauses are looking at, getting realigned because of, various changes to the compliance requirements. So how do we ensure that our ecosystem is also resilient? And it's not just the GCC who is resilient. We need to be ensuring that the third party, because globally, if you have seen, if a third party, is not resilient, you are not resilient as well. So I think we need to ensure that the entire ecosystem is resilient and, walk the path towards, that resilience.
Yeah, no, definitely. We have seen the entire airline industry go down because of the third parties. So, of course, we need to understand.
It goes, as Rajat mentioned, it goes much beyond the organization, and especially when you're working with so many third-party suppliers being the biggest piece of work that we operate. I think systems have become much accommodative, but even to get into the system, before even getting there, even to onboard a supplier, the kind of information that is being exchanged now in validating the supplier, the authenticity, what kind of information, the Data Privacy Act is all very documented. At least the things are moving in the right direction to say it is serious. Everybody is aware. It is just a matter of getting it. And it is being implemented almost in all the departments. Awareness is coming, but it is at there, like say, okay, is it just being done as a checklist, or is it being done because we strongly believe in it? I feel in most of the areas it is still seen as checklist. Some of the sensitive areas we all know it is definitely there is, but the problem is areas where people don't understand the gravity. And hence it is a more the responsibility of the readers to explain the gravity of the impact of each of those departments. Some departments, very easy to tell it. Some departments, you may not be able to articulate it. So I think that is also the responsibility of the leaders to articulate this better to get them going.
Yeah. Especially in huge setups, I think it becomes even more difficult where you have so many employees, working from remote locations and, other different reasons. So, final thoughts before we wrap up, how do you rate, our digital trust and resilience like the way we are right now? And where would you want us to be in the next 3 to 5 years? Nanda, if I might start with you.
I think we are spending a lot more energy on this topic, I would say, in the last few years than we have been in the past. So, from that standpoint, gives me a lot of good confidence that I think we are putting the right systems and processes in place. And I think going forward, I think one key takeaway for me from this discussion is I think we can do a lot more on how we collectively, address this issue. This is not an issue for one particular GCC or one particular industry. I think if there's one kind of key takeaway, I think we need to get better at sort of, collaborating more. The other thing that also kind of cautions me is we already have a lot of data out there. We already have a lot of product out there for a number of years, right? So I don't, any step that we take today won't sort of magically fix everything that we have in the field. So what is the best playbook? What is the most effective way of getting that done? I think there's really a two-pronged approach. So I'm happy that we are having the right conversations, now, and we have been for a while. And I think it's important to really collaborate more going forward.
Chakri, your final thoughts on this?
I think definitely an area of interest for the entire organization, GCCs especially, but it should much more evolve into a shift of mindset, and also it should be brought down into by design, by mandate, and the number one thing to be thought within product development, business operations, and execution. And that's the only way to move forward on this topic.
Yeah, I think it's a journey. It's a long journey. I think everybody has gotten started the way Nanda mentioned. It's been everybody's taking notice of it since the last few years, and it'll further strengthen this entire process going forward. And also, I think globally also we are seeing that a lot of these leadership functional roles in India focusing on compliance, risk, privacy. So there's a lot more attention from the parent as well and the headquarters as well on the GCC to be able to establish that COE maybe here in India, so that we're not taking care of compliance specific to the country here in India, but maybe drive compliances and regulations globally as well. So that's something that will definitely happen going forward. And also on the overall aspect of mindset shift that Chakri mentioned, I think that'll automatically happen once we have these leadership roles coming here in India, and they focusing on creating these center of excellence for not just privacy but overall compliance, globally as well.
No, correct. So I guess mindset change is something that I see is the true solution if you have to really be compliant. And of course, I mean, being compliant is in the DNA of GCCs because you're already doing it for GDPR, CCPA, so that should not be difficult. And I believe, as my key takeaway is that it's a journey, and the more we collaborate, probably better we get and sooner. Thank you everyone for joining us here. It was a pleasure talking to you all.